Okay, so let me get started on the work which you're reading, Waiting for Godot by Samuel Becket. Let me read out a bit of background information while we're trying to get things going. Samuel Becket was born in 1906 to middle-class Protestant parents near Dublin in very, very Catholic Ireland.
There you are again.
Am I?
Sorry, I had wanted you to hear some of it at least, and then just then listen to me instead of it. Now you'll just if it doesn't work, it doesn't work too bad. So he was a bright student of modern languages at Trinity College in Dublin. Upon graduation, he taught at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure in Paris between 1928 and 1930, returning to Dublin in Ireland to hold the position of assistant lecturer in French at Trinity College. 2 years later, he left an academic career to travel around Germany and France until in 1937, he decided to settle down permanently in Paris. During World War II, he joined the Muqawami, the French resistance, working near Avignon as an agricultural laborer. After the war, he settled back in Paris and decided to write in the French language. Thus, many of his most famous works, including Waiting for Godot, were initially created in French, later to be translated by himself, of course, into his mother tongue. In 1959, Trinity University bestowed upon him an honorary doctorate in letters, and in 1969, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. And please listen to this sentence. Why are we giving you the Nobel Prize? Quote, for writing which acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man, end quote. Elevation in the destitution of modern man. And this is really what the first part, the literary part of 204 is about. Speaking about a kind of a mood of twilight of a civilization. That's one way that Thomas Mann's book that you just read might have been considered. Freud, the end of all the great hopes for reason and conscience and the creative imagination, all that, it's all just id. And World War I and the crash of capitalism in 1929. It was you can imagine that period of time would produce the sort of literature that is not going to be telling you how wonderful humans are and how wonderful life is. It's going to primarily be telling you, let's focus on the misery of human life and the destitution. And why are things seemingly, why have they reached this point? In Europe, the greatest place of civilization, the mission civilisatrice, they went out into colonizing the whole world with a mission to civilize people. When I went to do my theater training in England, the head of where I went told me, yes, we had a Lebanese who came before you. He seemed like a civilized chap. As if, we were coming out of the jungle or something. I was about to kind of scratch myself. And, so civilization had come to mean something really great. But you've just had civilization and its discontents. Man's malaise in society is the way Freud had first given title to the book you've read. And death in Venice. And now you have absurdity. Life has no meaning. That's going to be the primary meaning of it. We all seek meaning in life. Human beings are the animal who needs to have a purpose, needs to have some kind of meaning in life. Either there is a meaning to be discovered, or we have to create a meaning, a la Freud, to give ourselves some kind of meaning in life. So in this first part now, with this bringing Freud and Thomas Mann and now Becket together in this literary unit, it's all about this kind of thing. This is sort of a play now that is writing which acquires its elevation in the destitution of modern man. He's written important novels, poems, short stories, in addition to plays and mimes for stage and radio. He died, Allah yarhamu, in 1991. For more detailed biographical notes, you have the whole web to explore. I'm not going to waste your time or mine giving you any further, but it's very interesting to read the biography. I hope you've seen that when we did Nietzsche. Nietzsche says every work really that's serious is a kind of an autobiography. You know, there's a human being behind it, and the more you know about that human being and the context in which that person was speaking, the more you'll understand and be able to appreciate whatever philosophy of life they are presenting to us. So with Becket, this is the kind of background that I've tried to give you. This is placing him a little bit, at least, as the human being who's giving a kind of an autobiography in this particular work. He's telling us what he has come to understand life is all about when he wrote it in the middle of the 20th century. The play now, and as we go on to your fly sheet, the play, that's number 2 there. Basically then, this play is unlike most plays you've probably seen, unless you're in literature, because up to the 20th century, early 20th century, there are very few plays like this. Up to, in fact, when Becket started writing, you didn't get plays of this kind. But plays of this kind became very popular after the middle of the 20th century, and we even had in Egypt. You have the Tree Climber, and you have authors in the Arab world who also started to use this kind of medium, this kind of language, this kind of vocabulary, artistic and all that, to express once again how in the Arab world perhaps there's an echo of what was happening in Europe with these absurd plays. So when you look at the play and you try to look at its structure, in the past I used to be able to tell you, compare it with Oedipus the King, because you all would have had 201 or 205 before you took a 204. If you haven't, well, read Sophocles' Oedipus the King. There you have what you normally find in a play. The play starts off with a definite situation, a plague in the polis, humanity, Thebes at the time for him, and the need to discover and remedy the cause of this plague. The situation has a clear development as bit by bit the truth is revealed to Oedipus, until finally all the issues, tensions, problems in the play reach their resolution. He is the cause of the plague because he has killed his father and married his mother. Can you turn off the sound? The sound is on for some reason. Okay. Oh, I'm hearing reverberation. That's okay. So anyway, the play, and it's resolved when he discovers that the cause of the plague is he has killed his father and married his mother unknowingly, unwittingly. He didn't want to, but that's how the thing. So there's a beginning, there's a development, there's a climax, there's a resolution, and then there is the end, the denouement, when everything is sorted out. You have a clear storyline proceeding in with a clear plot, a clear action in a linear direction. Moreover, in Oedipus the King, we were presented with carefully created characters: Oedipus, the prophet Tiresias, his wife, mother Jocasta, etc. Specific people with specific characteristics, people with a past as well as a future. Human beings who, for the most part, spoke, acted, and reacted in a way easily identifiable as portraying and conveying meaningful human activity and behavior, thought, and feeling. The setting was recognizable as Oedipus's plush palace in Thebes and the surrounding area. Furthermore, the events followed one another in such a way that even a CS faculty member like myself could get a clear sense of chronology, of time. Time behaved itself, didn't play tricks on either us or the characters. Seemingly serious human issues, themes were presented, worthy of consideration in a CVSP course like this. In a word, in attending a play like that, we have, to one extent, we're comfortable. We can form a reasonably clear idea of what's going on, and we don't have the feeling that someone is playing some kind of nasty trick on us. Any bewilderment, any discomfort we experienced was connected with poor old Oedipus and the horror of his objective situation. He has to kill his daddy and sleep with his mommy, whatever he tries to do, all right? So we're basically comfortable. We could figure out, we could relate to what was happening in the play. When you read this play, and I'm sure you've all looked at it by now because you all read your plays in CVSP, the text before you come to a lecture, Meg, I'm sure. But anyway, when you take a look at the play, if you haven't yet, and you're not confused, you're not bewildered, then you're, salam alaikum, you're great, you're wonderful. But normally if somebody's just reading it, it's going to be a bit bewildered. What's this all about? Who are these guys? Becket's Waiting for Godot offers no such comforting qualities, features, or characteristics as a more normal play like you had with Oedipus the King. Imagine yourself watching the play. The curtain opens. We don't quite know where we are, either from the setting itself or from anything the actors do or say. Two characters, Vladimir and Estragon. They call each other Didi and Gogo. They're dressed in Charlie Chaplin-like costumes of a gentleman manqué, someone who was rich. So they're the costume they're wearing was wonderful, but now it's all torn and tattered, and it had a past, but now it's kind of lost it. So you've heard nothing up to now, right? That's great. That's what Waiting for Godot is all about. Okay, it's supposed to confuse you. You see, that's the point of it all. So two characters, Vladimir and Estragon, they call each other Didi and Gogo, wearing the dress of someone rich, but now sort of like a bum. They co-inhabit a place which is totally free from any specificity, a kind of dreamscape. You've seen pictures of the moon, and stuff like that. A surrealistic place. We know, neither we nor they know where it is geographically, nor will we know any more about it by the end of the play. Who are the two characters? Again, we share in the characters' own ignorance. Neither they nor we know anything of consequence or clarity as to their identity, background, biography, in a word. Vague remembrances, disconnected phrases here and there, but no solid facts. A little while later, we meet two more personages, Pozzo and Lucky, a landowner and his slave. But if we had hopes that their appearance would shed any clear information on the subject, their exit leaves us even deeper in the dark. For now, instead of asking ourselves, who on earth are Vladimir and Estragon, now we wonder, who on earth are Vladimir, Estragon, Pozzo, and Lucky? The fifth character in this play is a boy, a messenger, sent by Godot, the one the tramps say they are waiting for. The boy tells them that Godot, when he comes at the end of Act 1, Godot won't come this evening, but surely tomorrow. Now, this is the first sort of quasi-concrete piece of data that's given to us, that Vladimir and Estragon are waiting for a Godot, and that Godot will surely come tomorrow. Everything else that has happened hangs in a cloud of unknowing. No satisfactory causation or motivation is evident. This is the one piece of seeming certainty and purpose the play gives us so far. This is the meaning of life. They are waiting for Godot, who sends a messenger to tell them, well, he can't come that evening, but surely he will come tomorrow. Act 1 ends shortly thereafter. Act 2 begins. It's a two-act play. Except for one apparently significant change, Pozzo's blind, Lucky is now dumb, he can't speak. We sit through more or less the same sort of thing that took place in Act 1. Once again, a messenger boy comes at the end of the act to announce that Godot can't make it that evening, but surely will come the next day. Bukra bil mishmish, as they say. So the play ends. The time has passed with the characters doing many things, talking, arguing, eating, bickering, thinking, urinating, dancing. We've been complaining. We've been entertained, because if you do the play well, and when they were the students, 2 or 4 students were watching this, they were laughing their heads off all the time. But when it's done well as a play, it's extremely entertaining. Maybe we've been moved to tears or laughter or boredom if it hasn't been done well. But perplexity, this is the heart of the absurd. Life is all about being perplexed. We never really can know anything for sure. So, of course, the question is, what then do we do? But first of all, to get your minds wrapped around the first part of this, what is life all about? Okay? So, basically, nothing happens twice. This is how a critic, a newspaper critic attending the play, next day, Nahar, Safir, whatever whatever papers still survive. In Lebanon, they're all going away. Safir, Allah yarhamu. But anyway, it's online. So this critic said about the play, nothing happens. Twice. Where are they? Who are they? What are they doing? What's happening? Who knows? Now begins the fun. What on earth does all this mean? Now I put on my CVSP hat and I try to give you an interpretation of this play. What on earth does it all mean? Well, Becket's direct answer to the question when they asked him, who or what is Godot? He says, Habibi, and he said Habibi for sure. He said, if I knew, I would have said so in the play. More broadly, concerning the overall meaning of the play, again, Becket says, Habibi, we have no elucidation to offer of mysteries that are all of their making, the journalists, the critics, the CVSP lecturers. My work is a matter of fundamental sounds, and he says no joke intended, because in British English, it means farting and things like that. No fundamental sounds, okay. My work is a matter of fundamental sounds, made as fully as possible, and I accept responsibility for nothing else. If people, CVS 204 people, want to have headaches among the overtones, let them, and provide their own aspirin. So if you get a headache, trying to understand it, make sure you get your own aspirin, because Becket says, "Makhasni, it's not my fault, Habibi, I just did it, I presented the play, and so if you find anything in there, that's your problem." Now, from this perspective, Waiting Godot can most aptly be compared with a psychologist's Rorschach test. That's why the title of this lecture is Interpreting Waiting for Godot, of headaches, Rorschach tests, and Peter Sellers. Hopefully, you've heard of these three before. A Rorschach test in psychology is you get a blank piece of paper, splatter ink on it, for instance, and then you let the patient that you're trying to help in psychotherapy or whatever, and you get them to sort of say, what do you see in this picture? And as the patient starts to interpret what they see in this picture, there's nothing there objectively, you see. It's just a splash of ink. As the patient tells you what they see in there, the psychotherapist or the psychoanalyst or whoever starts to get an insight into what's happening in the mind of the patient, because the way you interpret something always reflects your perspective, your autobiography. Thank you, Ammu Nietzsche. If you remember that aspect of Nietzsche, which I think is very important. So basically, what he's telling you here is that watch the play, go to a good production sometime, because it's often done. Read it and get what you can, try to imagine it in your minds, and then what do you find in it? That's a test for you. What do you interpret in it? So as you interpret this play, supposedly according to Ammu Becket, you'll learn more about your own psyche, how you see things. What do you see? What do you think gives meaning? Your interpretation is totally your own perspective in a very specific, subjective way, which is, therefore not something that's universal in any way or interpersonal, but it's really your own particular little understanding. So that's what we're asked to do. However, since I have to get through this work with you, let me try to tell you some ways that you can relate this to what we've been doing in CVSP 204 and the time and the context of what was happening. There are two major movements going on at this time, the late 19th century and then the early 20th century. In the world of art, including theater in other words, there was a great debate between what should art be doing. Should art be taking you away from real life, or should it be immersing you in real life? And real life was being interpreted in a kind of scientific, deterministic way, generally speaking. You should be shown on stage what's happening in your society at the time, so you can become much more aware of the socio-economic, political, psychological issues, concrete issues that are taking place, so that you can be better informed and go out and do something about it, so that art shouldn't just be an entertainment. It shouldn't just be a flight from reality. It should be directing you to real. And realism meant, basically, the material aspect of the socio-political economic world. Now, obviously, artists would never put up with this because the heart of an artist is, from this perspective, anti-realism. Art is precisely that creative power that helps others, through your own powers and your own skill, to see things that they won't see with a camera or a documentary or a scientific lab or a scientific theory or whatsoever. Art is one of the geniuses of the artist, is that that artist is able to produce for you a kind of insight that a certain blindness we all have, and particularly gets more and more in the kind of scientific world we're living in. Certain eyes that we have become blind. So the artist helps you to see, to have insight in various ways. And therefore the picture of, a very bad picture, I suppose, but whatever. Any of you seen Picasso's Guernica ever before? Look it up on the web and see it in a color picture, in a much better picture than this. But this is one example of the kind of art that was coming up at the time as a reaction against the so-called realistic and naturalistic modes for art. In Stalin's Russia, the only art allowed was what he called scientific realism, which meant propaganda for Stalin's Russia and Stalin's Soviet Union. That any art that took you away from that was not allowed, in fact, certain types of Stalin's world. So a reaction in the West and in the East was through anti-realism. So when you take a look at this was produced during in the Spanish Civil War, when the Spaniards were carving away at each other, in good human fashion. And so this is what he produced as his own vision into what was happening, humanly speaking, at the time. So take a look at it and see if you can understand what he's trying to present to you in a non-prosaic, a non-scientific, a non-geometrical, a non-philosophical way, but to get you involved with the carnage that was happening and the horrors that were happening, as well as the light, if you see in here, the light and the possibilities that were still there. Okay, the more you understand the world of art, the more you start to get into what was happening here, the more you're able to interact with it. Okay, this is anti-realism. So this is one, Waiting for Godot is one of the most famous and the most successful works in theater that presented this view that truth is not going to come through a documentary. It's not going to come through something you get on television. It's not going to come through just an interview with someone. It's going to come through engaging your whole being in an artistic fashion. So your whole mind, you have a mind, you have everything else, you know how to use those, but there's a certain blindness that needs to be awakened. This is what great art is meant to do. So supposedly, one critic, by the way, who attended this play, Harold Hobson of England, he was a very famous critic, found this play like a revelation for him. It just really opened up his whole being to truth. All right, this is truth. He compared his experience to that of Paul, St. Paul, who was a Pharisee, persecuting the Christians, and he was going off to Damascus to persecute more Christians, and on the way, supposedly, to Damascus, Jesus appears to him, and he becomes one of the main leaders of Christianity, a total conversion and radical, that's what it stands for. In other words, a symbolism of somebody being, having such a deep conversion that he changes the whole pathway of his life. Harold Hobson said this work for him had that effect on him. He compared it to the road of Damascus experience of Paul. So to let you know what was happening in that period of time, with everything you're getting from the prophet Nietzsche, who was predicting all this was going to happen in the 19th century, if you read him and understand him. But you're seeing it in Freud, you've seen it in Thomas Mann, now you're seeing it here. The whole mood of a period that expresses for you, in Waiting for Godot, how a lot of people at that time found meaning in the play itself. A play about that there is no meaning simply in life. You have to wait. Maybe something will happen to give you clear meaning. Well, what do you do in the meantime? You do what Freud was telling you. You build civilization. Whatever you do, we always find something, ADD, to give us the impression we exist. So, lots of Freudian defense mechanism, deflection of our true desires, sublimation, all of this. All of this, you see, once again, now you're getting it in a play. Primarily, what the symbolism of the play presents, in one way or another, all the way through, are various things we do. So there are Bibles, and there are boots, and there are, there's arguing, and there's bickering, and there's thinking, and there's, the part I'll try to read for you is, there's reason, the great hope of the civilization, and what has happened to reason. All of this is meant to throw at you, or to bring you into an experience of the destitution of modern man, as the Nobel Prize said about him. To let you experience through art, because art is always redemptive. Art always actually gives a meaning to whatever you're going through. That's the trick. That's why Becket can say, this play isn't a hopeless play at all. If you get it properly, you'll understand it's meant to drive you to find some serious hope in your life. Get beyond all the cliches and the idols and all of the stuff like that. This is what Nietzsche was doing when he says God is dead. He's not a garden variety atheist. He's telling you if God is alive, the God of monotheism, then we should see it in the monotheistic society. You're all dead. You're all compromisers. You're all hypocrites. You're all so God is dead. But what does he say? Therefore, we have to be dead. God. So the response there's the atheism that puts on you the burden of responsibility in a world that seems to be going flat. So similarly, Freud in his way tries to wake us all up to the negative in life. Okay, but are they just trying to get us to be negative? That's, I think, is the trick of reading this literature. Is Becket just trying to get us negative about the fact that life is absurd, it has no meaning? Godot never comes in the play, all right? But who knows? He might come tomorrow. So don't give up. Now, what do you do in the meantime? In the meantime, you do all the things that create civilization, if you want to put it into Freudian language. And that's, that's a good bit of meaning until you find some meaning that's really even deeper, because the human wants deeper meaning somehow than just what he's doing. But make do with the meaning you're getting now, and then who knows, maybe a Godot will come. So Godot becomes a symbol for most people looking at the play of that which you're seeking, which the human seeks as a kind of an ultimate something to really give meaning to everything. But it's not that simple. It's not going to come that easily. But you can't conclude it will never come. This is the main. I'm now trying to put the whole play into a kind, a summary of what he's trying to do there. Because one way of interpreting it, therefore, is that until you face these things, until you face these threats, until you face reality, you're in denial. If you think that just, what you're getting through science and technology and capitalism and communism and feminism and all the, the isms that Nietzsche was playing around with, if you think these are going to really give you the full meaning that a human wants, you're never going to get it there. Okay, you'll make do. So Freud comes and puts it into a scientific framework and says that's what we're doing all the time. We're just doing things to give us some meaning, to reduce the unhappiness, because life is all about unhappiness, because we have to live in society, and society is our enemy. And therefore we're doomed to unhappiness. We can never be fully happy, but we can be less unhappy, and so life is about being less unhappy. I think Becket is giving us a lot of this sort of stuff now in the form of a play. These people, they go through all sorts of things. They bicker, they do all kinds of fun things. They contemplate suicide. Albert Camus, if you ever heard of him, said this is the one serious philosophical problem for the 20th century. Suicide. Why shouldn't we commit suicide, or why should we? All right, suicide here becomes, just another activity, another thing we do. Let's commit suicide. Okay, let's hang each other. Okay, you go first. No, I'll go first. No, you go first. Après vous. No, vous. Why? If you're reading the play, all right? So he says, why you first? Well, you see, and then the one who's supposedly less intelligent, the other one, has to explain to the one who thinks he's more intelligent that, if we hang you, if you hang me, I'm light. I'll die. Whereas if they hang you first, you're heavy. It won't hang you, and so somebody will, read it and you get it for yourselves. But the whole play is to try to give you in so many different ways the challenge of, well, what gives you meaning? What's your Godot? Do you have a Godot? Do you think a Godot is there in your life? You now know what life is all about. You've got solidity, you've got the compass, you can do that. Of course, the message of these boys in the early 20th century is, following Nietzsche, is don't get caught up in idol worship. Monotheism talks about idol worship. There's only one God. All the other things you worship are idols. All right? Nietzsche puts it in his way. All the things you're doing are modern-day idols, the things you think are giving you full meaning. Hammer away at them. But if you got Nietzsche, find the meaning in each of them. They wouldn't be there if there wasn't some life in them. Get the life out of all of them. Don't give up on anything. Don't just throw it away, a knee-jerk reaction to something. He was a provocateur. He was provoking everybody to do that. Okay, Freud comes and puts it into a scientific framework. Everything we do is just running away from unhappiness. Compensation, defense mechanism. Civilization is just that. All right, and now Becket is putting it into a play. So in all these ways, hopefully the positive part of it is we're being challenged to be critical thinkers. Have you ever heard that phrase, that slogan? In university we want to train you to be a critical thinker. Well, that's part of what it means for you to becoming a critical thinker. To be exposed to all of these various ways that people have tried to put life together and find meaning, and those you agree with quickly, be careful, think about it. Those you disagree with it quickly, be careful, there may be something there. I think that's what this particular play is doing. So let me go through some of the terms on the sheet just to help you. Peter Sellers, of course, you all know who that is. I'm sure you wouldn't have passed the entrance exam to university. He was a great comedian, actor, and he's now you probably don't see much of him. But there's a movie called Being There, and it's still available if you want to get it on the video or whatever the things they sell. Being There. In that play, in that movie, that was to show you how this kind of thinking was in film and many other forms. In this film, basically, Peter Sellers plays the part of a handicapped man, a gardener, who, when the people who are keeping him as a gardener, they die, so he's thrown out into the world. And being thrown out into the world, he starts to meet people. And people who meet him, they start speaking to him. He looks fine, and they start speaking with him, and they start thinking he's speaking the most profound things in the world, which he could never do because he's handicapped. So they read into Peter Sellers all of the things they want to see in someone. They're looking for someone to be their meaning in life, their Godot, So they put into him all the meaning of life. At the end of the play, he is being considered a serious candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. Are you following me? Right? Trump? No, sorry. Okay, so, hold on. They couldn't get anybody but Trump and Hillary. Are you American? You didn't have to vote, did you? You're lucky. Okay, but anyway, the whole point here is how we create idols. How we are worshipers. First lecture I heard in CS by an Islamic thinker in 202 is saying, for Islam, man is the worshiping animal. The animal who always has to find something to worship, and so they create idols. Well, this is what Nietzsche was talking about, what Freud was trying to tell you about the things you think are objective. He said maybe you didn't know that, but he says humans are good. He says, as far as I'm concerned, with few exceptions, and he never looks into them. That's when you can complain about him scientifically. He says, my fellow human beings are good for nothing. And so if you read Civilization is Discontents, if you know what id is, okay, all we are is we're out to satisfy our own id. Love is narcissistic love, or if you love something because we see ourselves in it, because we want something. All right? Okay, this is the collapse of the great slogans of modernity and the Enlightenment, reason and progress, and the perfectibility of man and science and technology going to get us everywhere. Then they had World War I, the most educated people in the world eating away at each other. The collapse of capitalism, which was supposed to be the best possible economic system in the world. Then they had Marxism, and then Stalin played around, killing a lot of his own people and giving Marxism itself a bad name. And then of course now it's a lot better. Now in the 21st century we're far advanced of all of that. But it's kind of challenging anybody who still has this kind of naive view that humanity is about infinite progress. Remember what Nietzsche says, I look around me and I find the survival of the unfittest. Right? And so, trying to challenge you. You don't have to accept any of these things. But they're meant to provoke you to be critical, to think about it all and see, and see if you have a way out. So basically, The second thing there, because I said the first one was the artistic, realism and anti-realism. The second thing was connected with philosophy. In the early part of the 20th century, Heidegger, who gave then rise to a lot of the people who followed him, like Sartre and Camus and stuff like that, and he was following in some ways Nietzsche. But Heidegger had thrown out a very powerful symbol of who we are as human beings. When we start to think, because remember, they're always talking, Nietzsche says, I'm speaking to the victorious. He's speaking to his fellow intellectuals. You're not talking sort of, and anybody can pick up the paper and understand it. So basically, what Heidegger was saying, when we start to reflect on life, we come to the conclusion of this. We don't really know anything seriously for sure, right? We're just thrown into this world. Where did we come from, etc., going past just the things we pick up by osmosis from our society and all of this, but something that I really have owned as a critical thinker, all right? We're just thrown into the world, like this Peter Sellers gardener. He was thrown into the world, right? We're thrown into the world, and we have to do the critical thing of finding meaning for ourselves. And we can either reach a point of saying there is meaning in the world, but I've found it now. It's not just because I picked it up from my religion or my society. There is meaning. Or you can say there is no objective meaning, and therefore I have to create meaning. The human being is the creator of meaning, and each one creates whatever gives that person meaning. So there are many ways you can, but all of them have to be your own personal road. This is existential thinking in the 20th century. Existential thinking tells you get away from all this abstraction of theory and Hawking and evolution and astrophysics, and as if you are simply just a piece of rock or just an animal or something like that. You are these things, but you're so much more. You have so much ability to create, to think, to imagine, to criticize. All this is your greatness. Use it to come to your own conclusion. Doesn't mean it's going to be different from everybody else, but usually you're going to come back to believing something a lot of people believe, but now you understand it more critically, more deeply, more profoundly, more interactively with others. This is what this literature, I think, that's what helped me to do when I was a student, but when I first came across these people, the challenge to think beyond them, but you don't be in denial of them. Life may be absurd, the way this play is telling you. There may be no meaning. You may be just filling in time, giving yourself the impression you exist by doing things, by building civilization and congratulating yourself, whatever it is you're doing. So basically then the presentation is that life itself presents you with nothing. And so some of the words that I used there, man thrown into the world, you're now under 7. B, if you look down to there, man is thrown into the world. This is the philosophical sort of thing. These themes were played around with by Heideggerians and by existential and phenomenological philosophical thinkers in the 20th century. No God to give you, no society. Society is your enemy. Humanistic values, liberté, égalité, fraternité, New World Order, Arab Spring, you're always having nice, I think, free, liberate the world, all these wonderful slogans. They're not real. They're not real. They're at best they've become idols in the Nietzschean sense, or they're just, sublimation in one way or another for them. So basically, in the beginning, God? No. Not in the beginning, God as in the monotheistic culture, but rather solitude. You're alone, baby. You have to do something. You are God in the Nietzschean term. God is dead. You are now God. So solitude here becomes, remember with Nietzsche, he prefers solitude to being part of the herd. He doesn't like solitude. He says, I wish I could find my way out, but I'm not going to just take it, just given to me. So he never found an answer to his own solitude. But solitude is not your enemy. Your enemy is mediocrity. Your enemy is being a slave, not being a master. And you can be a master and a slave in whatever you're doing. So don't become a Nietzschean and then sort of miss the whole point. Today Nietzsche might be attacking very different, victorious conclusions about life in the university. No fellowship, no empathy, no communication. So the language, the way he presents the language, they speak to each other, but they never understand each other. Language has lost its power to communicate reality to one another. All right, so they speak. There's a lot of things. They do something like this, but they never really fully understand. This is the Tower of Babel. All right, each one has become speaking their own language. Nobody understands, but they're using the same words, but nobody understands anybody. The essence of life: anguish. And what is anguish all about? Angst. You can't translate that wonderful German term, angst, into English, but anguish is part of it at least. And basically it means the one truth that a thinker can come to if they're really thinking from zero is mortality. I'm going to die. I can't be in denial about that. I see it all the time, and those of us living here in Lebanon during the war especially, at any moment we could be, we can't say we're not. Mortality is such a given truth, a fact of life. You cannot, but does it have any meaning? That's the point. Death itself is not a great, horrible thing for humans. The horrible thing is if you don't find any meaning in it. It could be just the end of a biological process, could just be, but the fact that humans think about it, they worry about it, that gives them, that is, because, and the main purpose, the main problem of death for the human is we don't find a meaning for it. That's the problem of Ammu Gilgamesh, Haram, he did all he could to try to find some meaning, but he finds no meaning to it. That's why it's tragic. There's a tragic thing in the Gilgamesh search, a wonderful search. Utnapishtim is there. I'm going to go and see how come he is what he is. And he finds Utnapishtim is a big slob, so there's no reason, there's no meaning in life about why anybody, and only one person can get there. So the meaninglessness of death is what really bothers us. Monotony, meaning there's no value, nothing higher. Freud, you've seen this. Okay, what we consider higher or lower is just, we're cosmetics. We're pretending we're doing something. We're giving ourselves some meaning, but nothing is more important than anything. A pig, if you like bacon, a pig is better than Socrates if you don't like philosophy. I mean, there's no, there's no real high. So monotony doesn't mean a boring play. If the play is done and it's boring, then it's a badly directed play. This was just a play reading, by the way. So it's not boredom, it's monotony. Nothing seems to be more important than anything else. The leveling effect of Nietzsche, if you go back to Nietzsche. Nietzsche is wonderful. I find all the modern themes of the 20th century in Nietzsche. If you get the point of Nietzsche, you don't just make of Nietzsche an idol. You start repeating what he said in the 21st century as if he would be happy. The threat of nothingness, absolute annihilation. You'll find they do things and then they stop, a silence. And then they do things and there's a pause. And then they do things, there's silence. This is his way of expressing that when you come face to face with reality, it's horrible because there's no meaning. So you don't want silence. See? Silence, in his Christian world, silence when you pray, when you come into the presence of God, you come into reality, this silence. No. Here, that's not in the beginning. There's no God. In the beginning, there's solitude. I'm all alone. Nobody knows me, nobody understands me, blah, 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 all that kind of thing there. So basically, the threat of nothingness. At any second, you could be just annihilated. All of these themes are themes that come into what is called a philosophy of the absurd. Life is absurd. There's nobody who can hear you. Sourd in French. Nothing hears you. There's no God, there's no rational coordinator. There's just blind evolution, all right? And what did Freud tell us about blind evolution? It's sadistic. It creates me in such a way I can't be happy, but I become a slave for civilization. So what I have to do to survive is to do the things that create civilization. See, that's what I would come face to face to in these silences and these pauses in his play. Therefore, they run away from the science. We always find something, ADD, to give us the impression we exist. What is the human response then? If this is the situation you're supposed to take a look at and challenge you, okay, various people in the past have looked at life in this way, but then they've gone beyond it. A Shakespeare, a Dostoevsky in the 20th century, a Malraux, a Sartre, a Camus, they face the absurd, but then they find a victory over the absurd. For the absurdists themselves, there's no victory. You wait. That's the meaning of waiting for Godot. All you can do in life is wait. And don't despair, because that would mean you're claiming knowledge you don't have. So don't despair. So suicide is not a logical conclusion. Wait, because something might happen to give you that. So what do you do in the meantime? You pass the time, you try to do what you can. So the others all found meaning in life beyond just that. So the existential thinkers, there's a difference between existential thinkers and absurdist thinkers. In common, absurdity. Response to it make them existential thinkers. The Kierkegaards, the Nietzsches, the Dostoevskys, that was the framework for it. Then the people who were influenced by them in the 20th century, all right? These are thinkers who decide the human being does have a victory over the absurd. The absurd is the challenge, But the human has the power, has the spiritual power to overcome, either through religion, like with the Kierkegaard and Christianity and Dostoevsky and Christianity, or a Nietzsche, throwing all the burden on the human themselves. The human has to do it all, so you get theistic and atheistic existential thinkers in the 20th century. But what they have in common, they all face the challenge of the absurd. Life could have no meaning, and you can't just dismiss it with your religion or your ideology or your, the perfectibility of man or your evolutionary theory or your astrophysical theory. These are just, palliatives, like, a Valium you take to quiet your energy. Life is a challenge. You have to fight it at every moment. You have to create it in every moment. And where you reach, the conclusion you reach is going to be different. There's no one conclusion. You don't have to all become Kierkegaardian Christians or Dostoevskian Christians or atheistic Camus or Sartre or something like that. That's your personal trek, but you have to face the challenge of the absurd. So the human response of the existential things I have under number 2: commitment, authenticity, choice, responsibility, absolute freedom, rebel creator. These are all the Nietzschean, Kierkegaardian, Dostoevskian values that come out of the 19th century flow into the 20th century. So for Becket, however, and for the absurdists, the waiting is all. All we can do is wait. That's what we're doing. So what paralysis here means, basically, we can't despair and we can't hope. So we're in between. We don't have enough information to despair and commit suicide. We don't have enough information to hope in something really that I have evidence for, because that's what hope is. Hope must be something I have evidence for, not a inshallah. And it's no. Hope is not just optimism. That's just a psychological tendency. There's no hope, and there's no despair. So we're in a kind of equilibrium. We're in a kind of paralysis. We can't really do anything. And see this in the play. Let's go. They don't move. Nothing to be done. Notice this when you're reading the play. Notice these themes there for yourself in the actual text, all of these themes. Becket calls himself the complete agnostic. He's the real agnostic. He's not just a person who's an atheist pretending to be an agnostic. He's a full agnostic. He really doesn't flow towards one side or the other. So metaphysical rather than functional or theoretical waiting. Waiting here is, we are the waiting animal. It's metaphysical, it's ontological, it's part of our being. Because you can have functional waiting, you're waiting for the end of this boring lecture, or theoretical waiting, like a Hume who says you can't prove anything is real, therefore you should be a skeptic. No, this is more telling you to have insight about your own humanity. It's an ontological, existential metaphysics, not a theoretical metaphysics, where metaphysics becomes something that you are authenticating in your life all the time. Wisdom, the love of wisdom. Philosophy means the love of really knowing what life is all about, not just being a good philosopher in the modern sense. Tragicomedy. He calls the work a tragicomedy. Notice this paralysis. It's neither a tragedy nor a comedy. Don't look up the definition of tragedy, a tragicomedy. You can lose if you look up the definition of politeia for Republic of Plato, if you ever did that. You'll miss the whole point of what Plato's doing. Don't think philosophical works, the term they use is easy. You have to see how they are using it. He's using the term tragicomedy here as a symbol of life. If it was tragic, at least I'd know. I can be great. I can serve the polis. I can, make a name for myself. Tragedy. Right? I won't get rewarded. Okay, but you don't want to live for reward. لا خوفا من الجحيم ولا حبا طمعا بالنعيم بل حبا بك يا الله رابع العدوية. It's famous for it. They say the Imam Ali has said it, and this is a kind of a monotheistic thing. You're not a monotheist because you want to go to heaven or you don't want to go to hell. Because you have something much, much deeper that's going on in your life existentially. So primarily, life is a tragicomedy. It's not a comedy, meaning comedy here means something that has hope. Comedy means no matter how much suffering there might be, but there's hope finally in life. That's the philosophical meaning of comedy. And tragedy, the philosophical meaning of it is that life is not going to reward you, Habibi, but don't live for reward. You can still have greatness. There's neither tragedy nor comedy. It's tragicomedy, a balance between the two. So there's paralysis, right? When you're paralyzed, you wait. That's what life is all about. It's an ethos of the failure of all the gods of modernity's promises. Godot is anything, the expectation of which keeps a man living or waiting, all right? And minimal hope is what, the kind of hope that he's presenting. A Frenchman called it hopeless hope. And basically, wars and carrots. It's like a carrot on a stick of my favorite All my friends, Hamir, all right? You've got me included, you've got a carrot on the stick. The carrot is your Godot, all right? You're running after it, and the carrot. Now, who knows? Maybe you bump into the wall and I get the carrot, Maybe you'll never get the carrot, So life is like being a donkey. All my best friends are donkeys. They know I'm a donkey, all right? And that's what life is all about, chasing this carrot, hoping that, at some point you'll get it. Thank you.